like to call to order the Wednesday, December 18th, 2024 meeting of the Tenino Planning Commission. Let the record show that all commissioners are present. Let's move through our housekeeping, take a look at the agenda for tonight.
I move to approve the agenda as presented.
Second that.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Take a look at the meeting minutes from November 13th.
Move to approve the meeting minutes from November 13th.
I'll second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, no members of the public are here for comment. There's one report. We've received no applications for our planning commission vacancy. No public hearing tonight, so we'll move right into our discussion of draft land use and housing elements of the comp plan with Melissa Paulson.
Thank you. Just to kind of preempt that, there's a copy of the updated draft survey questions. Kirsten went over them last month with you guys. She said that I've not reviewed these. She said that she's updated them with your comments and suggestions, and that she essentially just wanted you guys to review it. And if you do have any comments or suggestions, just let me know.
Okay.
All right. And then in your guys' binder in the front pocket, there's a copy of a PowerPoint. So that will be the general schematic that I'll be following. Essentially, as you already know through the agenda, we're going to be reviewing the draft land use and housing elements, some also additional documents so that you have a better comprehension of what all has gone into this. Please remember that these are very preliminary draft documents, so they're not finalized whatsoever. They look wonky because it's all track changes, so just keep that in mind. We definitely know that by the end of everything it will look pretty, but I always like to do track changes so that you guys can really see what's happening, what's changed, and what we're suggesting.
Nice. Sounds great.
So as a general reminder, the requirements of the periodic update, we've got a preliminary draft of the entire comprehensive plan due by June 30th with a finalized adoption date by the end of December. We have also, you'll find out a little bit later, but we've tried to shift the timeline to really have everything done by June so that because things don't go according to plan, we essentially, as things possibly need to be extended or moved, we have that time to work with, and we're not just, building to that December date. The comprehensive plan includes 9 elements, which are required by the Growth Management Act. We've got a couple of new elements that are required, including economic development, parks and recreation, and the climate resilience. We also have to coordinate with Thurston County and other agencies. Thurston County's probably the most nuanced because they're not working on our joint plan, the Tenino-Thurston County joint plan, until 2026. And then, of course, we have to conduct public participation and update the development code to implement this new plan. So we'll all work on that. The next slide is the Planning Commission review schedule. So this month we're reviewing the draft land use and housing, and then next month you'll see the draft transportation and natural resource elements. We've shifted, like I said previously, we've shifted everything up. So each month we'll see 2 elements, and then in April we'll see the suggested development regulations, with more of the finalizing everything through May and June, with hopefully that's middle of the draft, at least to Commerce, but hopefully we can get everything just up and running and submitted by the end of June.
And sorry, can I ask a quick question?
Yeah, of course.
At what point do we have to hold public hearings on the whole thing?
Yeah, which would be potentially May to June.
Gotcha.
sometimes that's where things tend to get elongated, which is why I'm like, I'd rather be kind of short on the time frame now, and then, you know, if we have to do it over a couple months, then we at least have that time, because the final draft to Commerce isn't due until December.
Gotcha.
So.
Thank you.
So the public engagement framework, this is just a quick review. So we're doing ongoing outreach. We'll be handling major events. There's the survey, and then 2 open houses, I believe, planned. And then planning commission, through every meeting that we have, is also public engagement, and then we'll ask for public input through hearings too.
Do you know when those open houses are tentatively planned for?
I do not. I have been back with SCJ for like a month. So I haven't gotten that far.
Okay. Could you just bring those dates to the January meeting?
Absolutely.
Okay. Thank you.
Of course. Yeah, and as just like a general background, so I previously worked for SCJ as a planner. When I was there 2022 to 2023, I also worked with the city of Tenino, handling planning commission and general on-call work. So when I came back, they were like, hey, you want to work with Tenino? I was like, absolutely. So that is why I'm here. So one of the big things that we tackled last month, for you guys to be able to review this month, was the draft community profile. It needed to be updated because there was new information from Thurston County's, the Thurston Regional Planning Council, TRPC. So that's essentially what's been changed. Page 3 to 4 reflects the population trends. If I can catch up to myself. There we go. The population trends, what I did was, it was just the historical trends, and I've created essentially a lump sum area that also shows from historic to projected. This is important because it really shows, gives a better overview of how the population has changed over time versus looking at the historic now and then going back to the end to see what the projected is. And this is through 2045. And then page 6, there are 2 separate types of figures for figure 5. I wanted your feedback in regard to what was easier to read. The first figure, the top one that almost resembles a Christmas tree, is the one that was already in the plan. And essentially what you're comparing is the overall population with the ages, the age group, and the gender of each age group. So if you wanted to give your input in regard to which one you thought was easier to read, I'd really appreciate it.
I like the bottom one.
Yeah, I like the new
I
one.
also prefer the bottom one.
one. Okay. I just wanted to call to attention on page 10, there's some formatting errors. The crossed out figure 11 is the exact same as figure 12. It's not going to end there. It just looks wonky, and I figured somebody might say something, so I figured I'd say something first. That was it.
Does page 5 need updated with the age distribution?
Page 5?
Yeah.
What was your question?
Does that table need updating with the age distribution, or is that basically still the same?
It's basically still the same, and the reason why is that the census data has not updated. So TRPC's data did update, which meant that we really could update some of the population and housing data, but the age distribution really didn't change much.
Gotcha, thank you.
right, and then page 13, essentially we just updated the residential construction activity. It's just the residential permits that have been approved. So it's just essentially that. And then there was 2 options in regard to chart type. There's the bar graph and then the, so basically the top or the bottom one. I felt like the bottom one made more sense in regard to showing how the permit levels have changed, but this is another opportunity for you to just provide your feedback.
I kind of like the bottom one.
I do as well, to show that
Well,
trend.
nothing happened in between the years, right?
No, yes.
So the top one kind of is like more like, there is no information between the points. I mean,
Yeah, the way that the data is collected is once a year, the HUD, which is the Department of Housing and Urban Development, basically requests each jurisdiction to provide the information. And so it doesn't have any other data aside from the year.
right.
Which is,
I guess the top one makes more sense to me in that regard, but I don't really care that much.
I can see what you're saying.
I
'Cause-
agree because it doesn't show per month.
Yeah.
Yeah. That I would like the top one more. It just makes more sense in my mind.
Yeah.
I don't have a strong opinion on this other than when I'm looking at yearly totals, I like to see, the bar graph. So,
And I assume we'll have 2023 and 2024 data available by the time we get to this point.
that's a great question. The Department of Housing and Urban Development is delayed in updating some of their data. So I did check to see if they had anything more relevant, and they don't have anything currently.
Gotcha.
So they do
When-
have up to 24. So what I'll do is I'll update the first graph to just reflect the new data for 2024.
Okay.
And yeah. And there was no data for 2023.
Gotcha. When we have that downstairs in our permitting.
Yeah, I could definitely ask for that information.
Okay.
I was gonna ask, but I wasn't sure if that was handled
Yeah.
elsewhere.
It's funny, I had that moment where I was like, I feel like that their information is our information, but
Yeah, you would think that.
yeah.
And then the last note that I have to discuss is just page 20. The figure got messed up, so it's not very helpful right now, but it will get fixed.
Gotcha.
On page 14 with the housing costs, will we have updated information on that as well? It stops at 21.
If the census data is updated, then yes,
And that's all combined in one.
generally, yeah. I generally check every month or two to see if there's updated data in regard to the census and TRPC. TRPC is much better about actually sending out an email and being like, hey, we updated this. I haven't seen anything, but again, I've only been back for about a month, so.
So
not-
then, and you get it from Zillow?
Oh yeah, I was actually the one that wrote the and did most of the research for the housing needs analysis back in 2022, 2023. So I hand went through Zillow and actually pulled all the information. So I could also do that. That would also make sense. I will make a note. Thank you, I appreciate it.
On page 15,
Yeah.
the last sentence says if housing prices continue to increase at a rate higher than incomes, owning a house will become unaffordable to many Tenino households in coming years. Once we do this survey, if there is a large percentage of individuals who respond that is one of their concerns, I would personally be in favor of including a sentence in that, basically showcasing what the current feelings of that is as well.
Okay. So essentially survey support language.
Yes.
Okay. Are there any other questions as you go through that? Figure 24, which is the existing land use map, will be updated, and we actually talk about the land use map a little bit later. And then, page 22, there's a highlighted portion that I'm waiting on additional information before I update it. It's highlighted for my reminding versus your guys's, so I just wanted to point that out because, well, it's highlighted, so it kind of calls itself out. And let me know when you guys are ready to move on.
When it comes to rent, I know that with the Tenino estates, like they own that double wide or single wide, but then they rent the land. I don't know how much of Tenino is like that, if it's just a very small portion of our like total housing. But is there something where we should show that too? Because I feel like over the past couple of years, I've been really hearing that that has increased a lot more so than it has in the previous years.
Yeah, that like
I
condo
think
style.
That's important too, you know, to show land rent if you own the house.
If I remember correctly, it's one of those things that's pretty difficult to get like good information on. That's not going door to door at like the actual places.
Or a survey, you know, saying if you are in this type of community or area, you know, what's your range of rent on that land? Can we do something like that where it's like 400 or less, 400 or 600, 600 to 800, or 800 plus?
Yeah, that might be interesting to include in the survey. Like, do you own your property or do you rent? And then what is your cost associated?
Yeah, and I'm not sure how much of Tenino housing is like that. I
Yeah.
do know there is a decent sized portion on one part of the town.
Okay. So just to confirm, adding some sort of survey question that really talks about whether or not somebody owns or rents, or kind of like condo style where they own their house but they maybe rent the plot, and seeing what and asking essentially what they're paying in rent. Yeah, okay. And thank you, this is all really great information and questions.
Tenino Estates is the manufactured home community that's beyond the grocery, just so you know. I don't think there are any other condo style, if you want to call it that, places in Tenino.
I wasn't sure if heading out of town here, there's another little
Yeah,
area where
right by
there's
the
some single
trestles.
wides, if that's a.
Oh, on the right side.
I want
Yeah.
to say they pay rent. It's one lot, but they pay rent to the lot owner,
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
is my understanding.
So
with
the
that
same
one.
concept.
But that one, they're not allowed to bring any new.
They are, as
They
long
are.
as it meets our codes, which our codes are very,
I
it
see.
can only be like a 2-year-old trailer.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
But they own those trailers.
Yes.
They do not, okay,
I know they don't own the one that just went in.
okay.
All right, just curious.
Yeah, the mobile home estates can be really hit or miss on how they choose to actually manage the land and the renting of them. I've seen it both ways, where they'll condo it, and then, because essentially if they condo it, right, they don't, the landlord effectively doesn't have to worry about the condition of the actual unit. They only have to worry about the land.
I think that is the way it is over there.
Okay.
So
I can do some research in regards to that.
individuals own their own units, but then rent the land, and the property owner, I think, maintains the septic.
It would make sense because it's in the land. Yeah, okay. Yeah, I can definitely look into that and see if there's any data that I can gather to add. Anything else on the community profile?
On page 22, there's a couple adjustments. The first one's obviously just the updating of numbers. The middle of the page, it says that no multifamily units more than 3 units in a dwelling has been constructed in the last year. Is that just a technical change, or is that like updated data?
It's just a technical change.
Okay.
Yeah. Because the multifamily can mean so much that it was specifically to make sure that it meant anything more than 3 units.
Gotcha.
Are those ones over here by the school considered townhouses?
Yes.
Okay.
I think yeah, I mean, I think I can think of some multifamily, also like the building that used to have the Tenino laundromat in it. That was built in the last decade, like just past the Granite Place now,
Oh,
where it's just those 2 buildings. I don't know, combined they have more than 3 units, I would think.
Townhouses get into a wonky area where it just depends on the jurisdiction's definition, because sometimes they'll call it out as a townhouse or a single, like an attached single family unit.
The ones I'm talking about are definitely apartments.
they're like fourplexes or something like that, aren't they? 6.
Do you know when they were built?
Do you know how many are in there? No? Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah,
I don't know. They were built in the last decade, I'm sure.
Yeah.
I wanna say it's only 4.
4 in each building. Or- I don't know how much that actually matters. Came up
I
with
mean-
1.
Yeah, and it could also be that if it was a remodel to do that, it
Yeah, I
might
think
not
they
count.
definitely built it.
Built it, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can look into it. I mean, I would assume that this is based off of the data that we had at the time, but
Those are those 2 buildings right next to the Stone Quartz place, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, they're definitely apartments.
Mhm.
And I wanna say there's at least 4
There's got to be 4 per building.
per
or 2
building,
building,
correct?
yeah.
And there's 2 buildings. There might be more.
I don't know. Originally,
sure
there was
4.
there was a public laundromat in the bottom of one of them originally, but
I can look into it. And you said it's by the Stone Quartz place?
it's like 2 lots east of the grocery store, kind of, or so,
Okay.
on 507.
Yeah, between the Quartz place and the dentist.
I think I know what you're talking about, yeah. Those do look relatively new. Okay. Any other comments? Questions?
I think I'm good with community profile.
Good?
Good to go.
Yep.
Good.
Cool. All right. So the next thing that we'll go over is the draft land use element, starting with the growth management checklist. So the way that we typically go through a periodic review is we start with the checklist and then we expand out from there depending on what the city and planning commission and city council want. So essentially what this is just a it's just a screen grab of the the table of the growth management checklist. These are all the required elements as to what we have to update and what we have to ensure are in the comp plan. Anything that's grayed out is things that we've assessed that we don't need to update or are continuously updated, or they're just not required. So what I focused on, you're more than welcome to ask questions about those, but what I focused on were the ones that we are required to update. Starting with the first one, which is essentially that we must integrate relevant county-wide planning policies into the local planning process. This holds back to the fact that the Tenino Thurston County Joint Plan won't be updated till 2026. So that will effectively be adopted at that time to incorporate it into the comp plan. So at somewhere in the comp plan, we'll essentially put a adopt by I forget the
Future
language.
reference.
Yeah, essentially, yeah, an adopt by reference of like whenever it's adopted. There is a current one, so we'll just essentially keep that. We'll have it adopted by reference, whatever the most updated one is, so that we don't have to update the comprehensive plan when the new one is actually adopted. The next one, which is item D, the current population projection is required to be throughout the, shown essentially throughout the plan, and it must be consistent with the county's sub-county allocation and their forecast and housing needs. So that is essentially just figure 1 and figure 2 in the draft, which is the next. I clipped them together to make it easier for you guys. But essentially on land use page 2 and 3, those figures are representative of the numbers from the county. These are the same figures that are also in the community profile. And then item E, estimates of the population densities and building intensities based on future land uses and housing needs is required. This is a visual element that will be reflected in the land use map. We have not, I've essentially commissioned our GIS person to start that process. It has not been completed, which is why we do not have a density, essentially heat map for you guys at this moment. As soon as I have it, I will bring it in front of you guys to discuss. And then section N, there's a requirement to include detailing of the siting of organic material management facilities in the development regulations. So when we go over the development regulations, we'll handle it at that time. Land use one was pretty straightforward this time. I did have a question in regard to the draft review. I have a couple of things that I wanted to specifically go over. So that is just the checklist, and then we'll kind of go over more in the draft review. We'll go over what the strategies are that we're suggesting for the community, and then also how you guys want it structured. I have a couple of suggestions. Obviously, it's your guys' city, so we want to make sure that your opinion's incorporated. So, starting off in the land use element, the first page, LU1, goes over the community character and the strategies for land use. My biggest recommendations is for the first 4 strategies that are listed. These are ones that were already incorporated into the current comprehensive plan. I do recommend taking out of Tenino in every single one. It's a bit redundant since it is the Tenino comprehensive plan. And then we also provided 2 additional strategies. So to provide context-sensitive development opportunities, and then also to participate in regional tourism to bolster the local economy.
This may be a dumb question, but what do you mean by provide context-sensitive development opportunities?
That's a great question. I don't know. I did not write it, so what I'll have to do is talk to Kirsten to see what that effectively meant. I don't want to assume. However, I don't feel like the context clues from the following verbiage actually clarifies it. So what I'll do is, again, I'll ask Kirsten to see if we can clarify that and get an updated version. I don't like assuming, but my assumption would be that through development regulations, we're essentially making sure that, you know, if a new development proposal comes in near the historic district, then it would have historic features or things like that, where it's really meant to be like, oh, you're near this thing, then we want it, like, you need to do this too.
Gotcha.
It's typically built into development regulations to ensure that we don't have a, very modern house in a historic district, or, things like that. Sometimes that's through design elements, and sometimes that's through development regulations that just have specific wording.
Gotcha.
But this document is meant to be read by the everyday person. So having something that my literal note is, what does this mean? It's helpful to get that feedback, so. Okay. And then did you have any feedback on the other one, or any questions about that first page?
I personally like the other one. I think part of the ag park is the benefit of the tourism that will come to it, so I think it's important to include.
Okay, and then starting on page LU4, the downtown plan essentially makes up the next 9 pages. My recommendation would be to pull the downtown plan out, not out of the comp plan and not out of the land use element, but essentially just put it as an appendix in the land use element. So essentially we would create almost a sub-document. So instead of having it go from land use straight into the downtown plan, we would still have a downtown plan. It would just be something that they can reference somewhat separately. This way, it keeps the strategies similar, but not confusing, because when I read this, I was like, okay, we have strategies and goals here, but we also have strategies and goals in the land use portion. So if I'm staring at it going, I don't understand, and this is my job, I assume that the everyday person also is like, okay, are these also things that we're working towards? And that brings me to the next point. What I did for the land use goals is I updated them to incorporate all of the information from the downtown plan, so that all of the strategies and goals and visions were also incorporated in there, and then we'll also have the downtown plan. So we don't have to worry about any of the actual identifiable goals and actions and policies being completely separate. They're already incorporated by proxy in there. Essentially I changed the verbiage and added some things, which are all through, starting on page LU20. Most of the other changes and edits were essentially clarification or grammatical changes, or definition changes, updates that were reflected by the legislature and required to be updated, or just a clarification. So one of the big ones was master planned community was updated to be more clear. But please feel free, if you have any questions, let me know.
Sorry, can you say that one more time? Page L4 through what page are you proposing be pulled and put as an appendix?
L4 through, I believe it's LU4 through LU15. It's just the downtown plan.
Yeah. Basically all the graphics and things.
Yes,
Gotcha,
yeah.
okay.
It was originally done as a standalone thing anyway, and they got stuck in here, so it makes sense.
It's pretty common, yeah.
Pull it back out again.
Yeah, and the way that I'm suggesting is that we effectively, we do pull it out, but we're just essentially putting it at the end. So it's very easily referenced. They don't have to go searching for a new document. It's still in the comp plan and in the land use element. It's just not right in the middle of it.
You made changes to the master planned community or whatever you want to call it. So what are we gonna do with it? Should we take it out completely? Like, what is the purpose of still having it? We still have the master plan zone, but things have changed a lot over there. You know, we have the equestrian center thing, and then some of it, as you have written in here, is problematic for development for other reasons. We still want that though, right? Like, in general, I mean,
You tell me.
I don't know. What's the purpose of it anymore, I guess? Are we still gonna require anybody who develops the remaining bits to do a master plan where they have to design the whole thing forever? I mean, is that just
Yeah.
like what we're gonna do, or?
My understanding, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that it's still required that anything over there in that zone has to go through the master plan community process,
Mhm.
which is a process. I do not know outside of this room if there's any interest in removing that zone. However, that is something we can talk about when we get to the land use map.
When they originally made that master plan zoning is when they annexed all that back in like 2000, late 2000s. And their intent was that there'd be box stores and all these other things, residential and like a whole commercial and residential development. But now that seems like, I don't know.
In my experience with getting like planning questions in regard to it, it has created an air of concern with developers in regard to the hoops that they feel like they have to jump through.
I would expect so.
Yeah, like the last time I talked to anybody was 2022, 2023. So I don't have any more relevant or recent information in regard to that. I can talk to Dan Penrose to see if he has any insight as to more recent conversations. But from my understanding, a lot of it is just that like the hoops that you have to jump through is a big concern.
I see.
So
Would it be possible for, since you're bringing back other answers and updates, to bring back like a pros and cons of removing this?
Yeah.
yeah, I can absolutely do that. So pros and cons of removing the master plan community zoning designation.
Yes.
One thing that I would like for you guys to, and that we ensure that we get to, is that just the review of the goals, policies, and actions that have been updated. Just provide your input and whatever questions you might have. Do you guys know what the importance of the goals, policies, and actions is?
Could you explain it?
Yeah, of course. Essentially, anytime development regulations are updated, if there's a public hearing, if there's usually a public hearing associated with some sort of development proposal, these are easy fallbacks of like, hey, this is the city's vision. This is what we want. And so the projects have to meet these. And so essentially it can be like, okay, well, I'm recommending approval through the planning department because it meets the, LU14 goal and policy LU 1.4. It promotes community projects, and so it's really important that we have this. And so essentially we have to go through and say, this is how we're meeting these goals, this vision of the community. So it's not as important that they are succinct. It's really important that they make sense to everybody, because what generally ends up happening is you'll have an interpretation, the planner will have an interpretation, the hearing examiner is going to have an interpretation, and if we can limit that concern, you know, that delta of interpretation through the language that we're, you know, essentially building these policies and goals off of, it will help so much in the long run, because most everybody can see the vision, but everybody has a different visual of what that looks like.
This could be a silly question, but in that master plan community, what's Lemon Hill? Like, it says a mix of residential types and densities on Lemon Hill.
Lemon Hill is like the hill behind the Hercules quarry over there, like the hill overlooking town, essentially, up there by the
That's what
water
it's
tower,
called. I
kind of.
never knew that.
Yeah.
Goal LU1.1 talks about trails, sidewalks, connected streets, and street trees. We've talked about it a lot. I would love to see or know what our regulations currently are on sidewalks, and see how we could potentially enhance those to ensure that as new development comes in, it's more walkable.
Okay, I can get the current regulations to you.
I would say that's just on one side.
Yeah. More walkable typically means that there's like either there's wider sidewalks, or there is some sort of barrier, usually a vegetative barrier between the street and the sidewalk. It can also include things like what they call bump outs. So sidewalks will essentially have like an area that they come out. So for like crosswalks. So there's a couple of ways that we can make it more walkable. Typically a public works question, so I'll probably reach out to them for a better insight and see if they would come to one of the planning commission meetings just to discuss that more.
Sure.
But I can definitely bring back the regulations and that information.
Okay, thank you.
So we did I don't know, like 10 years ago, I want to say, we did a downtown, I'm going to say downtown plan. It's not the same one that we were just talking about that's going to be in the appendix, but it looked at roundabouts at 99 and Wickman and McDuff or whatever by the auto parts place, and talked about bump outs downtown. It's on a shelf downstairs somewhere. But it was very good, and there was a lot of interest at the time. You know, it's a state highway through here, so I think that's where it kind of got derailed, because no one wanted to deal with WASDOT or something. I don't know, money reasons also probably. But it would be nice to somehow get that back, because a lot of work went into it, and somehow infuse it into maybe the walkable goals, that kind of discussion, because that was what a lot of it was about. I mean, some of the ideas were like grinding down the crown of the road downtown. Obviously maybe a little far-fetched, but when trucks go by, you know, the bottom of their wheels are basically above the level of the sidewalk, which kind of kills like wanting to eat down there or do anything really. I'm not saying that's like something we could do, but that document was pretty good in terms of walkability and bump outs and downtown type stuff. I think we really need to start working on the roundabouts at some point, especially at 99 and McDuff. Sometimes you can sit there but across the street from the auto parts store for like 5 minutes waiting for a chance to turn left, you know, it's almost impossible.
Yeah, no, I understand. Okay, yeah, it sounds like that was a downtown transportation plan.
Yeah.
Focused
I
probably
can't
by
remember the
Public
name.
Works.
It's like something about Main Street. I
Okay.
don't know, even though it's not
So it
Main
might be a
Street.
Main Street
but-
thing. Okay.
You know where that is? Have you ever seen that? Probably not.
Sussex?
Yeah.
At the top, yeah, where you're technically not supposed to turn left.
Right. No, I mean the plan that we did.
No, I have not seen the plan.
Right.
Very familiar with
We even
the
had like
plan.
estimates of how much things would cost, and we got
Yeah.
fairly far with it. But
Okay, so it sounds like, honestly, it sounds like the planning phase of a full engineering project. So I will look into that. Any other questions? Comments? Concerns?
are you going to be our planner now, or is Kirsten coming back at some point soon?
I mean, I would prefer to be your guys' planner. I think I'm mostly taking over. She's will still be the project manager, but I'm the senior planner on staff under her. So I've been handling most of the Tenino on-call work.
I was just
So.
curious, like how much information you actually wanted for your purposes.
All the information all the time. I literally, there's no stupid questions. There's no like weird things you can tell me that I'll just be like, I don't know why you told me that about the city. I love information. I love learning. So the more you tell me, the more information goes into these plans and talking. So
Okay, that sounds good. Thanks.
yeah, of course.
We also just have commitment issues because we've had 5 planners in the last year and a half, so
Yeah.
we just hope you stay.
I'm not planning on going anywhere. I just came back. But yes, I understand that since I left SCJ, it seems like there's been a little bit of a turnover for you guys. So do apologize about that. I know that there was some staffing issues. I'm not planning on going anywhere. And I really like doing essentially being your guys' planner. So just getting my brain back into it at this point. Okay, so
Sorry, one more thing.
yeah, go for it.
LU 24, tourism.
Okay.
It might be beneficial to just put another policy goal or policy under that goal
Okay.
that talks about working with what is the Experience Olympia Beyond, but they're called the Visitor and Convention Bureau to basically help promote
Okay.
the area.
And the scenic byway too. There's like that regional.
The Bountiful Byway.
Yes, Bountiful By. Sorry,
Yeah.
Bountiful Byway.
What are they called? Visitor.
It's the VCB, the Visitor Convention Bureau.
Okay. And what I would probably do is put some sort of generic language in regard to like the local economic development agencies,
Yep.
because I've seen so many name changes for those agencies.
Yep.
So, but yes, I can absolutely put a policy in there in regard to that. Okay. There are no current changes to the future comprehensive plan map. If you have any suggestions in regard to where the city could look to expand that are not already on there, please feel free to provide that information and I can write notes on the map. I will be printing out a large version and we'll have an actual workshop on it. Just not tonight.
I do have one question since I see it here.
Yeah.
On the potential urban growth area it says area to be removed. I'm pretty sure that's the park. I don't think the goal is to remove the park. I think the goal is to incorporate all of the new park into the UGA so that way it can be
That's
annexed.
true. So those,
I
yeah, those
think-
2 parcels to the east of the one that says it's gonna be excluded, is that what you're talking about?
I think.
Yeah, that is what it is. Those are the parks still,
Yeah.
or now.
So all 4 of those are is the park.
Well, the park is everything below the trail, which is that, looks like a railroad easement there.
Yeah.
So it's all those parcels south of there, plus the 2 to the east of the most southern rectangle.
Okay, so
We just got those.
okay.
Directly to the east of D. Is that what
So-
you're talking about?
It sounds like this
These
just needs
days.
to be updated to
Yeah.
reflect that
Yeah.
we now owned them and probably not wanting to take them out of the. Okay,
Yeah.
I will let our GIS person know.
And then, I don't know if this is a big deal, but the food bank is trying to.
I bring it
heard
up.
about this?
Yep.
So I was just wondering if that is reflected or if that matters at all for this map.
So the next thing we're going to talk about is a potential zoning and land use change because there's 2 parcels that the city owns and that the food bank has come to us in regard to rezoning from residential to commercial. And so this map is a proposed change to the zoning, which will also have to update the land use map to reflect. But essentially, and I took a Sharpie and highlighted the two lots. They're currently zoned residential, and what we can do is through this process, we can just update it to be commercial and extend that commercial corridor down.
Okay.
So that's just something, like, we have to obviously work through getting your feedback and ensuring that that's how you want the land use map to, or the zoning map to look going forward.
And then on the zoning map, we also have to add those park parcels that we just talked about.
Yes.
I would also be interested in if we do rezone those and the goal of the food bank, I will obviously need to confirm the goal of the food bank. If their goal is to move their main facility to that parcel, potentially looking at what the rezoning around that looks like, because I know we need like emergency housing and I think a few low income housing, so potentially looking at putting opportunities to use the food bank near the food bank. Like if those sorry, that didn't make sense. If the individuals who need those emergency houses, if that area could be used in that manner, it would make the most sense because then they're closest to the services.
The current food bank area or the proposed one?
The proposed one.
Okay.
They're already using the proposed one. It's a warehouse. I
Yeah,
don't know
but
if anybody could
I
live in it.
think from Jody's conversation, it sounded like their goal was to move servicing to there.
Yeah,
That's what
what
it sounded like, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, because they're just using it as a store, like a storage area
It's just
right
a
now,
metal
right?
building now.
Yeah.
I think they maybe want to build an oval or something.
Yeah, something.
Yeah, from what I've gathered, getting the emails, was that they're essentially, they want to build and do all the servicing down there.
Yeah.
They just currently can't.
Gotcha.
Right.
And so that's the biggest issue. So, and then I know there was some questions that came up from city staff in regard to what's happening with their current location, which normal zoning would just take over.
Yeah.
So. So essentially no argument with that zoning change though, right? Okay. I didn't think so, I just figured I'd ask. Okay.
Oh, on the zoning map, are we going away from C1, C2, C3 type terminology? Is that the reason it's special use commercial now? Or?
No, this zoning map is just more of a land use map. I just I didn't ask the GIS person to put the correct language, so
Oh,
I'm just
okay.
referencing it as
I
the
was just
zoning
wondering.
map
I was just
currently because
wondering.
that's what it says on there. Yeah, no, technically this is a land use map, and so what we'll do is we'll actually have also a zoning map that reflects the actual zones, because if I remember correctly, it would be C1?
C1's like the historic downtown.
No, it'd be
C2's like the grocery store and the entrances to town, and then C3 is like most of what is called special use commercial here.
Yeah, I feel like it's either C2 or C1. I just cannot remember off the top of my head, but we will cover that. I just don't want to give you incorrect information. But it is one of the commercials. I don't think it's 3 though. And yes, the final maps will be updated to reflect all of the newly incorporated areas, including the park. Is there any other questions in regard to the land use element?
So, what about the UGA? Are we gonna do anything with that?
Do you mean like expand it, remove things? From my understanding, the current discussions with Thurston County is that there's no proposed expansion or reduction to it.
Oh, because we had, I think, put forth the idea of incorporating
I think
a couple different areas that I missed some, maybe.
I think if I remember right, Kristen said no.
Christine?
Yes.
No.
Christina?
Yes. One of them,
All
sorry,
right.
said that she was using outdated allocation numbers. So then when she got the updated allocation
From
numbers,
TRPC.
yeah,
We no longer needed to do that.
yeah, that it was that Thurston County recommended that we look at a UGA analysis expansion in their joint plan, which would come in 2026 after our annual comp plan update or periodic one is done, because then it would be easier and it would be more focused on all of the opportunity with it.
So the county would then analyze our UGA for us then? Is that right?
I think it would be
Or we
done
would
in
do it?
collaboration during the joint plan,
I see.
which is to be done in 2026.
Mhm.
All right. That sounds good.
Yeah, I know that the county has a process that they do for the joint plans, and from what I understand, you're correct, that everything is very collaborative in regard to how things are getting done. And the county, I believe in the past, if I remember correctly, they do take on a lot of the GIS analysis, but we can definitely get to that in 2026.
No.
Oh. Okay, the next element is the housing element. So we're at an hour now. I can speed this up by not going through everything and then just asking if you guys have questions, or do you want me to go through everything individually? Every planning commission is different, which is why I ask you what your preference is, because I have no idea.
We just did most of this housing element with you a couple of years ago, right?
Yeah.
So, what do you guys think?
I'm okay going item by item just like we did through the last one.
I agree, I don't mind going item by item,
Okay.
just to make sure we cover our bases.
Yeah, I can absolutely understand that. So the first one, again, it has the same schematic where if it's grayed out, then it just means that we don't need to update it, or they're updated as needed. So starting with E, it's basically just the capacity of land for housing by income band and housing type. So we have to include that information. That land capacity analysis was already started by the county. We have to do more of a finite one for the city. That process has been started. It just hasn't been completed, so I don't have the specific information to provide to you. My understanding is that it will be pretty easy. It's just I talked to my GIS person like last week about it. So, and then F, so we have to provide for existing and projected housing needs for all economic segments of the community. Essentially, considerations for all income bands will need to include potential programs or actions to achieve housing for those for each individual income band. So that's something, once we actually have the land capacity analysis and more of that information, we'll be able to come back and go, okay, here's the policies that would be helpful for that, here's the actions that would be helpful under those policies, and then you'll be able to kind of make more of an informed decision. Don't necessarily want to start that now, because you really would just be recommending things that we don't have enough information to recommend. So the next one is G. So we must identify local policies and regulations that result in racially disparate impacts, displacement, and exclusion in housing. I did include an anti-displacement technical memo. Essentially, it just goes over general understanding of how we look at each policy and to review for anti-displacement concerns. I've not started that process. That is the plan this next week. And then I will come back to you guys with that probably next month. Just a general understanding of if there are any policies that do promote racially disparate impacts. Because we don't want that. And legally we can't have that. So. The next one, it still goes off the racially disparate impacts. We have to establish policies and regulations to address and begin to undo if there are any that are identified. And then lastly, we have to identify areas that might be at higher risk of displacement from market forces. So essentially what we'll do, and this will be part of that workshop that I was talking about with the mapping, is that we'll kind of go over a couple things. We'll go over any recommendations from you guys in regard to land use or zoning changes. If you notice any or have like any recommendations, we'll have that all on that map essentially. At the same time, what we'll also go over is areas that you guys might see that have any sort of concern that, like, if it's currently low income housing and it might be in poorer condition, if you know that land is highly valuable, a developer might come in and put in really nice housing. Well, what's going to happen to those people, right? Like they're essentially going to get bought out. Now where are they going to go? So the city has to actually create policies and goals that effectively stop that from happening. Or provide other alternatives for those people to not be displaced. So, and like I said, that will all be in the mapping exercise. I just want to get through the transportation portion before we start that mapping exercise. So honestly, it'll probably be next month. And then, so the actual update to the housing, the draft housing element, most everything was just updating from the housing needs analysis and copying it over and then making sure that it actually is still accurate information. But if you have any questions as you go through it, let me know. We didn't have any other recommended goals, policies, or actions for you guys. Most everything was pretty succinct in regard to what's in the comp plan currently. What we will end up adding is the racially disparate impacts ones. But if you have any questions, if you have like any comments on the current ones, if you want to remove things, if you want to combine things, that's also an option. So please look at this as an opportunity so that we can update it to make it more clear.
page 5 of this chapter.
Mhm.
Does this need updated with 2020 census?
Yes, it will be updated with the 2021 census, or the 2020 census and the 2021. There's also additional 2021 information that supports the census data.
Gotcha.
So, and I think most of that was actually, I must have printed off the wrong copy, so I apologize. But most of that was also updated in the housing needs analysis. It's in the housing needs assessment.
Gotcha. And then the goals and policies on 8 through 9, is that just based off of the housing action plan?
No, those are the goals and policies that are currently adopted in your current comprehensive plan. So I will double check. I believe they've already been cross-checked, but I will triple check on that.
HS7C housing affordability talks about according to the 2014 Thurston County assessor data. Will that be updated, considering it was 10 years ago? I'm not sure how often they update their stuff, but it
Which one are
seems-
you referencing?
HS7C affordable housing talks about the typical ranging between 80,000 and 150,000.
Yes, yeah. This is just a continuance of the data that was updated in the housing needs analysis.
Okay.
So that will be updated, yes. Thank you. And then there isn't anything else. I did put some additional information for your guys' review, just as a kind of more informational for you guys, which is again that anti-displacement technical memo, and then also there's a GMA housing needs allocation land capacity analysis from Thurston Regional Planning Council. It's quite long for most people to read. For technical information, not, obviously a novel, but, so if you have any questions, in regard to land capacity that the county has already done, it's a great resource, but I wanted to make sure that you guys had a copy of that. Otherwise, I don't have anything more for you aside from just finishing up with the housing element. So if you guys have any questions in regard to the policies, goals, or actions.
On HS9,
Yeah.
policy 3.5, it says facilitate home ownership by low and moderate income families through federal, state, and local programs. I would be interested in what everyone thinks about making another one that says basically the same thing, but first and second time home buyers, kind of to emphasize the need for providing housing for those who live here and are growing and aging out of their family's home and needing an opportunity to stay in the community.
So essentially like retention language,
Yeah.
residence, retention language. Okay. I mean, that does make sense, especially in smaller towns. That's something that we do typically see, especially as the condition of a residential unit goes down. A lot of times they'll look at other areas.
So you're talking about retaining people like aging in place, sort of an issue, or?
I'm thinking more of like the first time home buyers, so like the the new college graduate who has worked a couple years and is trying to buy a home,
Yeah.
keeping them here rather than them moving somewhere else.
Oh, like getting them to come back.
Kind of.
Okay. Yeah. So other communities have kind of combated that by ensuring that there are affordable options and just all their goals and policies in regard to affordable and keeping everything kind of essentially making sure that there are affordable options and that there's a wide variety of options out there. So a local community, that was one of the feedbacks that we got from that community members was essentially like, you know, there would be parents who their kid went off to college and then their kid tried to come back and they couldn't find anything, so they ended up having to move back in with mom and dad. And mom and dad are like, oh, okay, cool, but you could be in your own apartment, but there's no apartments available. So that just goes back to a lot of that, ensuring that there's housing availability. But I can definitely look to see if there's policies that have been instituted in those communities to see if there's anything that we could potentially include in here.
Yeah, it would be interesting to see what there is.
Can absolutely do that. Any other questions? I also put my card in there in each binder, so if you do have any questions, typically it goes through the city, but please always feel free to contact me if you need. And then I will have updated information. I have a list of things to bring back to you guys next month. What I would say, the next steps are that, you know, next month we'll go over transportation and natural resources. It sounds like we should maybe devote a little more time back to land use in regard to answering some of those questions. My concern is if we do the draft transportation and the draft natural resources, we're gonna end up being here for like 3 hours. If that's something you guys are cool with, absolutely, have no issue. We can also revise the review schedule to just do maybe transportation and land use again, and then just extend it out. This is one of those reasonings as to why I made it so short, so that we have this flexibility to work with. So.
Just see what happens, I guess.
Sounds good. Yeah, we can always play it by ear. I just figure I always ask the question, because if you don't ask the question, you never get the answer.
As long as we get it done on time, that's the main thing, I guess. So if we have to stay 3 hours, I think we would do that, but, you know.
I'll try not to let it get that bad. I tried very hard to make sure that you guys have all the information so that we can just kind of get through it. Land use is one of the, land use and transportation typically are the two biggest ones that we run into a lot of questions. And then land use and housing are so close in regard to how they're handled. That's why we typically will do it all in one lump sum, because housing usually doesn't have as many questions, but it's very close to how we handle land use. So I have nothing else for you guys unless you have any questions before.
I just want to say thank you. This was very easy to go through, and the way you presented it was very easy to comprehend and follow along. So
I
Yeah,
appreciate
thank you.
that.
Yes, thanks.
Can I ask one other question? Like, it's probably no big deal, but on table 3.1 in the housing section, the percentages are, I get what they're trying to say, like owner occupied plus renter occupied adds up to 100%. But then there's the vacant housing. That's a percentage too, obviously putting it over 100%. I just think it's kind of confusing. I don't know if it matters. Or maybe that's the way it's always presented and it doesn't make any difference, but shouldn't all three, the vacancy plus owner occupied plus renter occupied equal 100%?
And then there's the mix.
I don't care.
But it's
own rent.
not, oh, I apologize.
Oh, no, you're fine. The mix own rent, like mobile homes and stuff like that, where part of them you own the house, but you rent the land. And I don't know if that's an option to throw in there too, is getting the percent dialed in.
Yeah, this specific information, the census doesn't go into that, so I can get that I believe I can get that information, but I can't do it through the census information. In regard to your question, I believe it's because vacant housing isn't considered occupied, and it's only a percentage
Sure.
of the occupied.
Yeah, I get that. I got it figured out, like what it's supposed to mean. I just think it, anytime all the
Looks weird.
percentages add up to more than 100%, it's weird.
I guess if
I can understand that.
if that's considered 100% of that, then what's the overall, like, is that like say 90% of our actual true 100% of potential occupancy?
Total. So I would have to see what their calculation is based on.
Maybe it's
Looking
just
at
the way
it-
it's presented in the census and that's it, right?
No, I think it's wrong.
Oh, okay.
No, I think you're right. I think
Oh,
it's
good.
wrong because the occupied, it's essentially saying that the proportion is, what I think is happening is that the calculation is based on only the occupied housing, and so it's taking the owner and renter occupied and saying, well, that's 100% of the occupied housing. But that's not the question that we're looking at when we read this, right? The question is how much of the occupied housing is of the total housing units, right? So essentially whatever 100% minus 6.6 is what it should show, but it doesn't. So I
Yes.
think you're right,
Yes, that's
Yeah.
what I'm saying.
and that will be updated. Any other questions?
Well, I guess that's it. Okay, is there anything else?
If you guys don't mind, please take whatever you want out of the binders. I would like to keep the binders so that I can recycle them for next time.
Okay.
Literally take whatever you want out of them. I have extra binder clips.
Should we leave the stuff in there for ourselves for next time, or would it, is that what you're saying? Or you're gonna take everything out and replace it with the new stuff next time? I got you.
I can,
I don't, doesn't matter.
I can just leave everything from each session in the back. And then maybe just like as we go through, you know, it'll be like, oh, from last session, because if I left everything, we'd need binders that are like 3 feet thick by the end. But I can do that essentially where I just like add the new information over the top, and then once we get to a point where it's, you know, filling most of the binder, maybe taking out the older stuff that we haven't used, or maybe defining what, you know, maybe only putting the draft elements or the key elements in there. It's the first time using binders here, so
Sounds-
it's whatever your guys' preference.
I say just leave the old stuff in there, and then when it gets to be too much, then maybe we can just take the bit that's too much home and bring it back with us next time for reference or something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I prefer that. I
Got it.
think once the whole thing is complete, one, it would be kind of fun to have. But two, like as we get questions and then more information, we'll be able to refer back easier. I feel
Okay.
too.
What I can also do if you want to keep the binders is next time I can just like have essentially more of like a folder where it has everything in it. It's all hole punch. It'll be somewhat in the same organization stature, but you guys can put it in your binder however you want. I'm all about organization, so it's just whatever you guys want though.
I think this month I have enough of questions out that I will give it to you, but I do think in future I'll take it home and then read it, have any questions, and then come back.
Okay. Yeah, the only thing that I ask is that if it's not just some people keep theirs and some people don't, that if it's all commissioners or it's none of you. Like
Yeah.
I either have all the binders or I have none of the binders.
I think we can do that. All right, new business. You sure about this, Darnella? It's pretty
No,
awesome. It's sad.
Being part of it, you know, you realize how much, you know, there is about the community and how much we have to take care of the community, you know, people coming in, people staying, you know, like you mentioned, or, you know, displacement. Yeah, I don't know, I've gone back and forth on months, actually, many months,
All right, well,
You can always reapply.
yeah, you can always
Yes,
reapply.
yes, and things
You'll have to
change-
answer all the
things
new
change,
questions.
Things change, I'll come back, yeah.
Okay, well, as you can see, Darnell has issued her resignation letter for the planning commission, so now we have to accept it.
Or we don't.
Or we don't. No one's ever done that before.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I'll move to accept her resignation.
And I will reluctantly second.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
All right, that's it. We need to get some more people on here.
Yes,
so
we do.
If you know anybody, if either of you know anybody.
I'm gonna start harassing people.
I
Yeah.
instantly felt that, and it's like,
Yeah.
no applications have been received. I'm
I
like,
know.
Yeah.
Oh,
Keep
dang.
hearing whispers of people interested, but I haven't seen applications.
I gotta fill out the
Yeah.
paperwork.
Can we do another social blast and then?
Oh, I did it, sent an email this morning.
Okay, perfect.
Nice. All right. Well, with that, I guess the meeting is adjourned. Happy holidays.